Very new. This case here is a word not easy to pronounce, and yet Tunguska is the very symbol of an event of colossal magnitude and of a mystery which the event of the Tunguska has been going on for more than a century. This denomination that we know today, this history. Let's quickly go over the details of this intriguing case. On June 30th, 1908 at 7:13 a.m. in central Siberia during the reign of Tsar Nicholas II, an explosion of unimaginable force shook the whole region, nearly 300 times the power of the atomic bomb of Hiroshima. This explosion will destroy the entire forest within a radius of 20 kilometers, lying in the soil more than 60 million trees. Like common matches, the damage related to the explosion will be visible up to more than 1,000 kilometers. The epicenter, the sound NGO, will be perceived up to 1,500 kilometers, and the seismic wave and which will result from it will be recorded at more than 1,000 kilometers with a magnitude of 5 on the Richter scale. A cloud of dust and ash will spread in the upper atmosphere using the entire region and will be collected as far as Spain. As you will understand, the Tunguska event has all the superlatives, and it is simply a power is the last unimaginable destructive fact at that time, 37 years before the first explosion of the atomic bomb, which will become a sad benchmark for destructive power, is a unit of measurement. The explosion of the Tunguska appears to be an inexplicable event. The first expedition to study the reasons for this devastation did not arrive on the scene until 1927, 19 years after the events. When they arrive, the scientists are stunned to discover the total absence debris or impact craters alone, millions of trees lying on the ground swept away by a monstrous force, and a devastating shock wave testifies again and again from this cataclysmic explosion. Neither crater nor impact nor debris, but a total destruction of the forest in a circular fashion has since been grown center, which night still shelters trees raised towards the sky but totally charred. These observations will bring us the first key to understanding this event. The explosion of the Tunguska was not an impact or a crash on the ground, but an air explosion. Counts given the power of the shock shadow and the damage observed. This explosion would have taken place between 5 and 10 kilometers altitude, and the explosion overpowered would literally have laid all the trees in the forest located just below in a radius of 20 kilometers. Something has exploded in the skies of Siberia in 1908 with such power that it was seen more than 1,500 kilometers away. The question that everyone can ask themselves at this time is obviously, but what was it? What could have caused an explosion too devastating? Several hypotheses have then emerged. Among the best known we can find the fall of a comet or a large meteorite, the explosion of a pocket of methane volcanic conduits, an experience of Nikola Tesla and its famous Tower of Death, or crash of a Russian Roswell-type UFO. Now, let's take a look at these hypotheses in order to determine their probability and veracity. Concerning the experience of Nikola Tesla, the latter was indeed contemporary with this event and did indeed have an electrical experiment in upper atmosphere, geographically not too far from the Tunguska, but he never recognized be at the origin of this explosion, and he has always denied his involvement in this event. For the explosion of a pocket of methane escaped from volcanic conduits, the quantity of gas necessary for a tech deflagration cannot have been released quickly enough to concentrate. The explosive gas would have dispersed in the atmosphere on making it less flammable and eliminating any possibility of explosion. Concerning the crash of a UFO, the absence of impact craters on the ground and especially debris makes this hypothesis not very conceivable. Of course, one could suppose that the Russian army immediately blocked this hour and recover until the last crumb of this alien technology. But remember that we are in 1908 and it is not really the concern of the moment. The official thesis will therefore focus on the fall of a comet or a meteorite large in terms of the absence of craters and impact on the ground. The solution: following explosion in the upper atmosphere before contact with the Earth. Everyone will surely remember the Ural meteor still in Siberia that crossed the sky on the morning of February 15, 2013. These cosmic bolides observed is filmed underwent the same type of disintegration. He literally exploded 20 kilometers above sea level, causing a shockwave terrible which caused a lot of material damage, but fortunately no victim. We will find many debris of this rocky body after its explosion, ranging from a few centimeters to a few grams to more than half a ton. Regarding the Tunguska event, the gigantic size of the object, its blazing speed and an angle extremely inclined penetration into the atmosphere would then compress air between the celestial bodies and the surface of the Earth until this layer of atmospheric gases become too dense to be traversed and act like a wall, which would then have to integrate the meteorite or the comet between 5 and 10 kilometers altitude. And here is another good question: besides comet or meteorite, the answer will be given many years later, claiming that since there was no debris, the celestial bodies which exploded must then be composed of ice, which would then be transformed into vapor during the explosion, leaving no material residue on the ground. The hypothesis of the comet was thus officially adopted, responding to all issues which emerges around the event of the Tunguska, or almost. But when we explode ice, it causes clouds of ash and dust which is big enough and dances to cross the continent to the rock and reach Spain. It looks like the comet. They don't really respond to all the criteria. If the analysis of facts and evidence material cannot give us the solution to the riddle of the lineup, we now change the testimonies and observations of this event. Siberia at that time is a desert place covered with a huge forest stretching over several thousand square kilometers, including the most near is located more than 1,000 kilometers, so desert certainly, but not uninhabited. Indeed, the Toungouska people, the Toungouska, that not invented it, is a people of nomadic reindeer herders. Considering of the destructive scale of the atomic explosion until the summer, physical and visual of this event were shocked enough not to forget those of whom he had witnessed. Numerous testimonies to be collected from 1927, both from the inhabitants of the nearby villages and towns that flip-flops directly on the scene, and this is where this story gets interesting. Among these testimonies we find detailed descriptions of the explosion in itself, from the conflagration of the sky and the wave of shock and sound which smashed the windows and knocked people down. But many your testimonials allow you to better understand what happened on place at the very moment of the explosion. In fact, if we are to believe their observations, there was no explosion but several, and at least 5 at different distances and temporally is followed before the event. Own bandits, but especially the testimonies of the tones assures you that if a gigantic object has indeed arrived from the sky the morning of June 30th, 1908, several balls of light were emitted from the earth towards the object. These luminous spheres correspond to different detonations heard before the explosion of the Muscatone, and they came from different places spread over a geographical area extending over several hundred kilometers. Of flip-flops present at the scene have therefore observed balls of light projected from the ground in the direction of the object that was heading towards the earth just before the explosion, devastating Tunguska with a minimum of conspiratorial spirit and art, total lack of scientific knowledge and good reasoning. We could almost deduce that the celestial bodies that entered the atmosphere above Siberia in 1908 was intentionally destroyed by a battery shots from the Earth. Nor would you have to be completely crazy to believe in this kind of fanciful ranting, and yet the event of Tunguska is commonly associated with a very strange discovery made in this same part of the globe, the legendary Russian cauldron. You go tell me, but what is it about this cauldron? And you should know that in 1854 a Russian scientific expedition to the Valley of the Siberian Death discovers the existence of large metal structures isolated in middle of the desert forest. It is strange. Damen placed in the heart of swamps contains buried structures with the ability to emerge from earth and emitting strong radiation, preventing anyone from staying there for a long period. In total, up to 9 structures would have been observed along the Siberian Death Valley on several hundred kilometers and at different stages of sinking into the ground. No modern tool has succeeded in scratching or damaging them, and no sample could not be warned. The most interesting with its cauldrons, Russian metal domes, are the nomadic hunters of the region know these places and its structures for generations. The legends surrounding its metal cauldrons have been simply incredible. It would be an ancient technology aiming to protect the earth from cosmic objects threatening it, if we are to believe the traditions of the peoples of the region. When entering the atmosphere of a meteorite or large comet, the DOM would open, leaving take out the buried structures, which would then emit a strong light before literally projected luminous spheres in the direction of the object heavenly in order to pulverize before it reaches the earth. By grouping his observations and captions with the event of the Tunguska located only a few hundred kilometers away, you can easily imagine that the explosion of the celestial bodies that took place on June 30th, 1908 was caused by the shooting of these buried structures. It is for this reason that this event and its structures are generally associated on. Can also note that if the object were a meteorite composed of rocks and to destroy it by fire from the mysterious structures, Nortanic would explain why no debris and no craters were found, and especially why a cloud of ash and dust spread over all the region. The question we can then ask ourselves is who built his metal cauldrons, and when the local legend states that these buried structures have always been present in the region and their existence has been known for generations in living memory, nobody can say who built them, and when but a third element can be associated with the Tunguska event is quite mysterious buried metal structure, providing many answers and explanations to this mystery. It is about the file. There's some for all those and those who do not know this case. This is an interview produced in 1999 by a Swedish journalist and an alleged reptilian. Understand by this that the entity that was questioned during This exchange would belong to a race of reptilian humanoids native to the Earth and living in an immense underground city hidden several kilometers from depth. According to the words of this street, which come calling themselves the Certa, their species would be the fabric of iguanodon-type dinosaurs that would have evolved since the end of the Cretaceous 65 years ago. Million years ago, these reptilian humanoids would live still on Earth, or rather underground, since he would now live in huge underground colonies hidden from human eyes. It would therefore be an advanced civilization from our planet with very advanced technology. According to the words of the uncertain during this interview, an ancient war would take place on our planet. There are about 5 months in between these famous terrestrial reptilian and an extraterrestrial ethnic group came to Earth for change our species. During this armed clash between these two technologically highly developed civilizations, the reptilians would have reached destroy numerous enemy air and space units from the ground. If we combine this information with the fact that many positions surface belonging to this terrestrial reptilian species is located in particular close to the north of Europe and the desert regions of Siberia, you can assume that the metal structures of the Death Valley to the Russians are facilities built by this reptilian civilization. Therefore this explains why no writer relates their construction or their function, and especially why this technology still allows today to protect our planet from threats from outer space. Like you have observed, we can therefore relate no not one but two elements with the Tunguska event. Non-factual evidence can unfortunately not support this hypothesis, but it helps to explain the many inconsistencies around this explosion of 1908, like the cloud of ash and dust that has spread to Europe where the absence of debris on the ground, but it also makes it possible to relate the different testimonies, visuals of the time, such as the multiple explosions that occurred just before the explosion, or the luminous spheres perceived as starting from the ground to move towards the heaven. If this hypothesis is just, the event of the Tunguska would have then was the destruction of a meteorite by an ancient technology built over 5,000 years ago by a reptilian humanoid civilization, inhabitants today several kilometers below the surface. Given the devastating power of this aerial explosion, we can deduce that if the impact had taken place between this Neo and our planet, we might have experienced the same fate as the dinosaurs 65 years ago. Million years anyway, this celestial body has been destroyed by ancient technology from another civilization, or although it exploded naturally in the upper atmosphere. This event should remind us of the fragility of our existence on this planet. If we don't want archaeologists to find our remains fossilized in millions of years, maybe we should stop fighting over trivia and we unite to be able to face one day a real threat from the sky music.